Up next is BeeJay's IDE tips and tricks. Welcome, BeeJay.
Thanks, Irina. It's good to be here. I'd better introduce myself because it's been a while since I presented at a JUG. And just for those who don't know me, my name is BeeJay Johnstone, but most people call me BeeJay, which is my initials. I first started with what is now Jade Software Corporation back in 1993 when we were mainframe based. Started using Jade in the alpha release days when they shared it within Jade Software about 94, 95. And from 96 through to early 2004, I was actually manager and ran the technical support or Jade support help desk. So late last year, I decided I'd, in all my dealings when I wander around inside Jade and deal with people and they get me to drive their keyboard, they keep going, how did you do that? How did you get to that screen so fast? What did you do? So for Christmas last year, I wrote these 12 tips for Christmas that I put on the Facebook page and the Slack channel, which are done community run channels. And then earlier this year at the first Jade community meeting of the year, I also did a live presentation and there were a lot of people there that said, you know, I read your tips on Facebook. I thought they looked really good. But when I saw them actually in action, I was able to see how you could really make use of those tips. So decided for some of you, if you've read them and you're already using these tips, it won't be quite as exciting, but hopefully for a lot of you, you'll get a few tips on how you can optimize your performance and what you do in the IDE. So I'm just going to share an IDE and run this as a live demo. And before I forget, I'll make sure I turn on the magic pen so that you can see where my cursor is. So over here, I'm going to go through 14 tips. It was 12 for Christmas, but we've got a couple of extra bonus tips for this one. So the first tip was about folding code sections. Now, I know a lot of development teams have this concept at the top of their forms. They have sort of a standard definition of who created the method, what its purpose was, etc. And you can use your mouse and go over to the folding on the left-hand side in the gutter and click on the plus and minus to fold and unfold it. But I find that doing that, I've taken my hand off the keyboard, and so it's going to slow me down. So you can actually use Control and then star on the numeric keypad, and that does the same thing. It folds, and it folds based on where your cursor is currently positioned, and it'll find the first logical folding point above that point. So Control star folds it, Control star unfolds it. Now, it does have to be the star on a numeric keypad. It won't work with the star key on your standard keyboard. So if you're using a laptop that doesn't have a numeric keypad, unfortunately, this tip won't be any good for you, but most people tend to use full-size keyboards plugged into the laptop most of the time. The next tip was about splitting the editor pane. This is a feature which I discovered by accident when I updated to a later Jade release. So down here, I'm just going to write some extra lines of code, and I'm just going to do a write statement, and I want to write out one of the local parameters or the local variables in the method. But I'm getting older now, gray hairs there, and I can't remember what those parameters were called. I didn't write this method originally. Well, we'll pretend I didn't. So what I can actually do is open up a split window, and down the bottom there, I've got another copy of the window, and I've just folded up that comment using Control star, and I can see there, actually, if I make my window a little bit bigger, I'll get a bit more space. Hopefully this will work for people at the other end, and I'll just add a little bit more space. So we can see here on the bottom window, I can see all the parameters to this method plus the local variables, and in my write statement in the top window, I can go, it was p scan for that I wanted to do, and I also wanted to write out the value of morvars 5. So that's all really good. Now, some people prefer not to use keyboard shortcuts or don't have the memory capacity or can't be bothered learning shortcuts, which I don't quite understand because they're so useful. You can actually position just below the horizontal scroll bar on the top method pane and then drag that down to the bottom, and that gets rid of the split window. And then you can do the inverse. If you hover just below that horizontal scroll at the bottom of your editor window, mouse down and drag up, you can split your window that way. But I much prefer just using keyboard shortcut because it's quicker and easier. And if I take that bottom pane down to the same place where I am and move that top one, we can actually see that it's actually a live edit window in both cases. So as I'm typing in the bottom editor pane and selecting morvars 8, if I get it right, morvars 8, you can see that's appearing in the other split window. So they're both live views of the same source code. It's just a nice, easy way of getting to look at your other stuff. Now, the other thing that I discovered by accident one time, I was wanting to just look at some lines of code, just a couple of lines above here. There's something that I wanted to refer to in my code, but I don't want to lose my cursor point. So I'm doing another write statement, and I just need to refer to that line to do what I want to do. So if I hold down the Control key and press up arrow, it's actually going to scroll that editor window, and there we go, line 161 was the one I wanted to see, but you should see that my caret's still there at the bottom on line 188, so I can just start typing and focus hasn't been lost from the line that I was on. And you can use control and down arrow to do the same thing. The only change in recent times, and I think it was a scintilla editor or a Windows change in one of the Windows patches, you used to be able to scroll off so that the line you're on is off the visible window and it would still remember where your cursor was. But if I scroll up now, when the cursor reaches the point where it would go off the visible area, it has now actually altered the point where that cursor is. But it's still useful if it's just a couple of lines you want to scroll up. Next one of the things, and I'm going to just expand that comment field again with the keyboard. One of the things that I don't like in the latest Jade version, some people do, is the way when you select something, and I've just selected the letter O here, it's put a whole lot of green O's highlighting every other O that's also in the source code. And if it was just, say, the word Max, it's highlighting all the other occurrences of Max. Now, I personally find that distracting. It gets in the way of what I want to do. And in Jade 2018, there's currently no way to turn that feature off. But what I do is make it visually turned off. So what I've done is I've opened the preferences window. I'll just zoom it in case you can't see it on your screen. So get over to the right place. So here we go. I'm on the preferences window, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this yellow color that's being currently set to the background. So I'm just going to go into the preferences, define a custom color. It already knows about that yellow color. I'm just going to add it to my custom colors. And then a little bit further down, we've got this additional selections area, which is currently that horrible green color that's getting in the way for me. I'm just going to go into that, select that yellow color that I grabbed previously and apply that. And then I'll just go out of zoom mode now and I'll okay that. And now if I go and reselect Max, visually on screen, I can't see anything, but behind the scenes, it's still applying that additional selections to all the other occurrences of Max. It's just applying the same color as the background of the editor. So that's a good way of getting rid of those if you don't like that, like me. The next tip, and for this one, no, I don't want to save my changes. This is just a demo. When you're using Shift F11 or double F11 to navigate through methods, and then you navigate through several methods, so I'm just going to go through another method and another method and another method. Now I'm going across to a method on a different class via a myC3 reference, and now I'm going to a method on app. So when I've done that, every single time I did the Shift F11, if I look at my window menu, it's now opened a whole lot of additional forms, and I can see that if I go onto the screen and just drag around some of those forms. Every time I use that Shift F11, it opened up a new form. And now when I've finished, I've got to the point where I wanted to get with my code. I've got to keep going. And now I've got all these windows to close, and there's another one, and there's yet another one, and yet another one. And finally, I'm back to where I was. So that's a lot of forms to close at the end. But luckily, there's a feature that was added. It was added originally in Jade 2016. I'm doing this demo on Jade 2018. And it's on the source management tab. There's a reuse method source window option. So I'm going to turn that option on. And now when I press Shift F11, we get a slightly different window rather than just a free floating editor only window. It's opened up what I call a senders browser type window. That's the one where we've got a list of methods at the top and then an editor pane underneath. And each time I shift F11 through the next method, if you look at the top window, it's adding another entry as a child entry to that list of methods. And then if I do one more, so now and I'll just move the splitter so you can see it. So up the top, we've got a list of all the methods that I went through to get to my current method. It's a live list, so I can actually go back and look at those other methods with just a single click. And if I look at my window menu, there's only this single form that I've now got to close rather than the 8 or 9 forms that I had to close previously. So I could close that now, but I'm going to use this form to go tip number 6. So tip number 6 was another one I discovered by accident. When you're looking at a method, and it doesn't matter how you got to that method, it could be a free floating edit window, it could be where I am here. I want to actually go and have a look at that C3 class. Now, if I click the C on the toolbar, it's just going to open a class browser with objects selected and whatever the schema context is that I was at the time. But if I use the Control-B shortcut, it's actually going to open a class browser and pre-select the class that method was defined on. And it's schema intelligent here. So if that class was in a super schema, so say you've got a model schema and a view schema, it will open the class definition in the model schema. But if that method was a method you added to the model class in your view schema on the subschema copy, then it will open a class browser on the subschema copy instance in the subschema. So it's just a nice quick way to get to that class. So that opened C3. And if I have a look at this one, which is on my app class, and do a Control B, we've gone straight to the app class. I've actually put a suggestion in myself, a Jedi, to suggest it would be really good, as well as selecting the class and schema context, if it also selected the method you're actually viewing at the time. Because often what I want to do is go to the full method and then look at what other methods there are, look at re-implementations of that method, and it's a lot easier, saves you having to select that. So that's the Control B shortcut. Next one, swapping out of the keyboard with the mouse. So for this one, I'm going to pretend that we've got a developer in our system who doesn't have the option turned on to add open and closing parentheses for methods that don't have parameters. So I'm going to have a look at all these references to our commit transaction method. And this one here just simply does the commit transaction, but before it does that, it passes off to our notification manager to send notifications that are queued up. So if I do a references, and what I'm going to do is go through and find all of the places where the opening and closing parentheses haven't been put in. So at the moment, focus is on that top list. I'm pressing down arrow, and in fact, I've left the system as it was from when I did my last dress rehearsal. So let's just pretend there's a few places where there's methods that haven't got the parentheses so that the demo is more meaningful. And some of you are probably wondering, how am I getting my cursor out of that edit window and back up to the methods list, which is what this tip was all about. So at the moment, focus is on the list up the top, so I can go up and down between the different calls to this method. Pressing tab has put focus to the editor pane, and then I'm going to type in the missing parentheses, and then I'm just going to put that in the clipboard to save myself some time. Now, a person who hasn't learned the shortcuts would then use the mouse, go up and click on the next entry in the list. But there's a much better way of doing it. So if I have a look at my preferences and go to the shortcut keys, and I'll scroll the list down, and there's a shortcut that I've got mapped called prior control, and I'll just zoom in so that you can see this. So you can see here, there's a editor option called prior control, and I've mapped that to Alt F6. So if I go out of zoom, so what I'm doing literally to do this via the keyboard is I'm on the top list, I'm going down, here's the next one that's missing the parentheses, I'm putting them in, compiling the method, Alt F6 has put focus back to that list up the top, down arrow, there's the next one that needs fixing, I'll fix that, Alt F6 again, and then keep going down. So it's just a quick way to get from an editor pane to the top list on a sender's browser. It also works if you're here on the class browser. Alt F6 has put me to the list of methods in the class browser. But that's somewhat of a moot point in Jade 2016 and 2018, because there's a much better way of getting to your list of methods. So I'm just going to navigate to a class that's got a whole lot more methods on it and show you this in action. So this class, we can see here, we've got quite a lot of methods in the methods list, and we've got quite a lot of properties in the properties list. So the shortcuts that I use, and I'll pretend that I'm in a method so that you can see this in focus. Now, write some value out. And I've compiled the method. Now I want to go and have a look at a property and look at references to that property. Now, I don't want to slow myself down moving for the mouse. So Control 6 will actually bring up, and I am going to use the mouse to show you what it's done. It's brought up a little pop-up window here just above the method list. And I'm going to type chain. And what it's doing is it's now showing me all of the properties on this class that have got chain somewhere in the name. And I can go down to my chain movement from, and then I can do a property references on that and see there's no references to that property. If there were references, it would have just shown me the references. And for methods, it's the same thing. So if I do Control 7 and type INF, then the only method that matches that somewhere in its name is get information as string. And if I press enter, I'm now on that method ready to do my thing. Control 7 movement's got a lot of things. External looks like quite a good one. So there's two methods that have got ext somewhere in the method name. So that's just a much quicker and easier way to navigate around methods. That's tip number 8. Tip number 9, autocomplete. So there's been quite a lot of times when I'm wandering around the building and people are doing stuff where they've just slightly mistyped the property name, and then what they tend to do is backspace their way all the way back so that they can start typing so that they can get autocomplete up again and get the selection that they intended to select. So for the purposes of this demonstration, in our app that I work on day in and day out, we have a navigator pane down the left, and it's got 5 logical sections to it, favorites and alerts, etc. And we use the Control 1 through Control 5 shortcuts to swap around those tabs. And I discovered recently that it didn't work with the 1 through 5 on the numeric keypad because they're different key codes. So what I needed to do was to get this code where we register our form keys, and I needed to have it handle those alternate values. So if I just navigate to the constants, we can see here that I had a number of constants predefined for each of our different panes, and then I've defined additional ones with numpad on the end of the name, which are literally the same as the non-numpad version plus an offset value. And if I look at the offset, it's just adding 48 to those key codes. So that's the thing that I wanted to do. And so then I could have just, down here, I'm on the alerts, I could just type the underscore numpad, but I'm mistyping that. I actually can't remember exactly what I called it. Now, what people would do is they'd backspace all the way back because they want to get autocomplete back and type NAVI pane, and oh, there's the one they're after. But actually what you can do is where your cursor is currently positioned, and I'm positioned just after the T in the favorites line at the moment, if you hold down Control and press the space key, it will actually reinstantiate the autocomplete, and it will take from your current cursor position to the left until it finds either a space or a dot or something that means it now knows what you're looking for, and it's giving me a much shorter list to choose from. So literally all I did was go through, and I'm not even being 100% accurate. I'm just getting part way through the word that I want to do something with and selecting. And so that's just a quick, easy way of getting your autocomplete back. Now, it doesn't just work with constants. If I have a look at PK, it's giving me help keyword and P key array. If I'm just after a dot, it's going to give me all the methods that are valid for an integer array. If I go to the A, it's going to give me all the ones that start with A and add, or a couple of Jade report writer check options. So that's just a quick, easy way. Control space, I use it day in, day out, all the time to get autocomplete back again. Here's a bonus tip for you. This is one that I just learned recently. When you've got a word that's full of camel case, so if, for example, we've got navigator, pane, entity trail, numpad, there's a capital P, a capital M, etc. If you use Control and then backslash and forward slash keys, you can move backwards and forwards, and what it will do is take you to the next uppercase or lowercase letter in that camel case word. So I'm just after at the D and the numpad on the entity trail. So one jump takes me just before the capital P, another one just before the capital N, just before the capital T, capital E, capital P, capital N. When you're going forwards and you've got underscores, it does take you to the underscore just before a letter, but that's still a lot closer than you can get jumping. So that's Control forward slash and backslash. Bonus tip. Tip number 10, Jade script class can be subclassed. A lot of people didn't realize that you could subclass Jade script. So a common thing that I've seen in a lot of systems is everyone prefixes their Jade scripts with their initials, and you get a very, very long list of Jade scripts, and it's very hard to get to the ones that are yours because you have to scroll past a whole lot of other people's ones, although Control 7 can make that a lot quicker now. But what you've been able to do for quite a while now in Jade is subclass the Jade script. And so we've got, in our real system, we've got a developer scripts class, which has nothing on it, but it's purely a superclass that we then put one subclass for each developer who works in the system. We have our frequently run scripts, things like forcing a user off, release scripts that we run before we cut a release to check all the things that we can check programmatically, all the development standards that are being followed, and unit test scripts. So it's just a much easier way of having a whole lot of Jade scripts, but separated by developer. Tip number 11, finding classes on the class dialog. So a lot of people have got the prefix where they put 2 or 3 characters on the front of every class name. So one of the things in Jade 2018 is you don't have to type those ABC. So I can just start typing CONT, and I'm going to get all the classes that have got continuity in their name. I didn't have to type the APC prefix. Camel case. So if I type camel case characters, I'm going to type A, B, C, CI, and H. So what that's done is it's found all the classes that have got those camel case characters in that order in the class name. So we've got ABC continuity item hierarchy, the dict, the set, and the TA that also match all of those. So it's just a useful way, if you know the letters that are uppercase and the camel case class names, you can just type those instead. That also works in the editor if you're trying to find, declare a local variable to set the class name. The next one is you person by. It doesn't, I already covered that, it doesn't have to start with that. But one of the things that I've found myself doing in our system is more and more I'm learning what's the unique part of the class name for the class that I want. So if I type CHYD, that's going to take me to my continuity item hierarchy dict, because the CHYD appends right here at the end, and there's only one class to choose from, so it's very quick and easy to select that class. So as I've been using this feature more and more, I've been learning what's the unique part of class names, or even if it's a class that I haven't done before, I start to think what's unique about this class name. So that's another useful tip. Tip number 12, multiple clipboards. So quite often when you're needing to make changes to a method, you need to tag the top of the method with a date and a time and a reference number that you're making the changes. And then any lines that you want to tag, you need to type them, the reference numbers on all the lines that you've changed. You know, that's quite a common coding standard for Teams. I'm not really that fast of a typer that I could type all those characters that appeared there. What I'm doing is I'm using the multiple clipboard. And up here we can see I've got 4 things in the multiple clipboard. So entry number 1 is always in my user profiles what I use for the things that go at the top. And entry number 2 is always what I'm using for going at things in the bottom. But of course, I don't want to move the mouse to do that, so I'm using keyboard shortcuts. So what's the keyboard shortcut, I hear you ask? It's on the preferences dialog again, under the shortcut keys, and there's 2 keys that you need to do. There's copy to clipboard and paste from clipboard. So if I go down to copy to clipboard, or copy to clip buffer, sorry, we can see that set to Control-Alt-C. I'll just zoom it for people that are on small screens. So we've got Control-Alt-C for copy to clip buffer, and then paste from clip buffer is Control-Alt-V. So it's exactly the same as Control-C and Control-V that you've been used to using. You just use the Alt key as well to do that. That's multiple clipboards. Now that clipboard, if you don't have a good memory, you can actually undock it, and then you can see on the undocked version, it shows you the actual text that's in there, and that's a live edit, so you can actually make the 1, 2, 3 into 4, 5 if you want, and then you've changed what's in that clipboard. So that's another easy way if you prefer to do it like that. And then if we just click on the button number 1, it will continue to insert that multiple clipboard text for us. Tip number 13, parent aspect, and I'll just get rid of that again. So one of the things that I found with parent aspect is that when you've got the stretch options turned on, you can use that to make your life a lot easier so that you don't have to do addition and subtraction in your head. Oh, here's another bonus tip. I've got a form class selected here, a parent aspect form that I'm going to use. Did you know if you right-click the Painter icon, it will open that form for you in Painter? That's another bonus tip that wasn't on my list. So I've got here a simple form, and the premise is this label and this text box, I want to move them out to the right to make room to make another copy of these labels up above, because we need to display more information. So I'm just going to select that and align left it with that text box, and select that label and align left it with that label. And then I'm going to select those controls that I want to copy, and I'm just going to put them down. So that's most of the work done. But the observant view will know that this text box that I've moved out has now gone off the right-hand edge. We can't actually see the resize handles on the right-hand edge. And if I bring up the properties dialog and have a look at the ruler settings, that control's actually got a parent right offset here. I'll just zoom it again. It's got a parent right offset of -408. So it's 408 pixels off the right-hand edge of the form. Now, what I could do is I could look at the width, and I could try and subtract 408 from that, plus another 15 pixels for the offset from the margin of the border. But that's a lot of mental calculations to do. If I have a look at the parent aspect for this control, and I'll just zoom in again, sorry, the parent aspect is set to stretch right for this control. And so what I know is that if I go to the properties of that control and I just type the 15 pixels that I wanted to be in from the right-hand margin of the form and press enter, Jade is going to resize that control. It's not going to move it because it's got stretch set. It's going to resize the control so that it's now the correct width. If I had the premise that I wanted to move this text box and this label down, because I'm going to put controls above and to the left of it, we've got the same problem with this text box. It's now got a negative parent right offset and a negative parent bottom offset. But if I have a look at the parent aspect setting for this control, it's set to stretch both. So what that means is it's going to do that nice behavior for me with the parent bottom offset as well as the parent right offset to resize the control rather than moving it. So I'm going to go to that tab and I'm going to make the parent right offset 15 and the parent bottom offset 15. And now that control is nicely situated within the form, and it's all ready to go to add the new controls. So it saves you having to try and do that mental arithmetic to work out how wide and how tall should you make it to get the right sort of offset. The good thing is that also works programmatically. I'm showing it here in the painter, but if you programmatically move controls down or across to the right to make room, what you can do is save off what the current parent right offset is, set the new left or top, and then put back the right or bottom offset, and it will just resize for you. This all assumes, of course, that you're using one of the two stretch options, either stretch right, stretch bottom, or stretch both for that to work. So that's that tip. That was number 13. So the final tip is creating UNL files the easy way. So I've just done a whole lot of work and I've tagged all my methods with ABC-900 because that was the ticket number. And I want to go for all classes in the current schema. And here we go. We've got our list of all the methods that I changed as part of this patch. So now I want to create a UNL file to extract those details. And the way I used to do it was I'd look at the class name there, I'd go to the class browser and copy that class name from the class browser so I didn't make any typo errors. And then I'd do the same thing with the method name. And that was quite time consuming. So one of the things I found out recently is that all list boxes in Jade, this includes list boxes in your own app, when focus is on that list box and you do a Control-C, it copies the contents of that list box to your clipboard. And I'm going to start Notepad. Now, this is another tip. This is a Windows tip, not a Jade tip. I know that Notepad on my system is the 9th pinned entry from the left on the Windows. So Windows Shift 9 is going to open a new instance of Notepad for me. It's just a quick tip. So I've pasted now what I copied to the clipboard, and we can see there that if I move that Notepad to the right, we can see it's now got all the details that were in that list. And so now it's very quick and easy. I'll do a replace of BeeJay play : with method space. And then I will also replace all the remaining double colons in there with the space character. And now what we've got in that notepad is the exact format we need for a UNL file to extract those methods out of the schema. So that was the final tip from me. So I'll just go back to my presentation. So there were 14 tips I covered, from code folding and split editor panes all the way to abusing parent aspect and creating UNL files the easy way. But these were my tips and tricks, and I'm not the sole expert on tips and tricks, so I'd really love it if any of you have tips that you want to share, or there's something that I haven't covered that you want to share with the world. Please feel free to share those on Slack and on Facebook. That's great. That's the end of my presentation, and I think we've probably got some questions, have we, Ashley?
We do, and a few comments as well. And one quick question here: how do you show line numbers in the editor?
Line numbers in the editor. Excellent. I'll just quit out of that. So the reason why I have the line numbers turned on is I work in a team where we have a lot of people that work remotely. And so when we were discussing issues, rather than having to go through a whole screen share, we'd just both look at the method and talk about what line number we're on. And it's really easy in the preferences dialog on the editor options, and I'll just zoom it for people that are, there's a view line numbers option. So if I turn that off, zoom out and okay it, we should find that the line numbers are now gone.
Sweet. All right, so BeeJay, I don't know if you can open the Q&A. You might want to do that just to follow along, because these a couple of these things are a bit on the long side, and they're sort of part comment, part question. But first of all, want to acknowledge lots of great feedback coming through in the chat. We also, there are a few people who have posted some of their tips into the chat as well, including control space as a big time saver. And we also threw a couple of dad jokes in the chat as well. So take a look through the chat, not you, BeeJay, but everyone else when you get a chance. BeeJay, on the Q&A panel, we've got a few comments and questions. So from Kevin, a good idea. I can't help but wonder why some of the new and useful options aren't defaulted on release. So this is really a comment around we need to make developers aware of these and change preferences, whereas if we did the reverse, that would raise awareness. So I think this is more of a comment than a question for you, BeeJay, probably more of a comment to the Jade Plant team. But if anyone has other thoughts or feedback on that suggestion, we'd love to hear about them. That's also something we could create a Jedi for if we don't have it. BeeJay, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought if people aren't like me and they don't go and read the release notes, they're not necessarily going to know about those new features, and having to go and turn them on. Yeah, I know a lot of other apps, what they tend to do is the first time you do something the old way and there's a new way of doing it, they'll pop out a helpful hint, or when you first log on, they'll give you some of those, hey, did you know you can now do this? Absolutely, I think that would be a great idea if that was in the product. But I should also point out, I'm a guest presenter here. For those who don't know me, I don't actually work in the Jade plant, although I did do the Jade support for a number of years. So these are questions that are probably good for John Richards to come back on as well.
Yep.
But yeah, I absolutely can see that would be a great idea to make people aware of these features, because not everyone's mad like me and wants to read release notes.
Yeah, good suggestion. And John Richards, do feel free to pop in if you'd like. A couple more things here. BeeJay, do you like the refactor options in the method window?
Oh yeah, I use those quite regularly. So probably the one I use the most when I'm refactoring, particularly when I come across methods that are really large, is there's a whole block of code that you now want to use from not just that method but elsewhere. Selecting that block of code and then doing refactor create method, that's probably the one I use the most often. That and renaming parameters and local variables. So if I go back to my C1 class, so pscan for, a lot of people might do a control find if I have it selected, and they want to change every occurrence of pscan for, but that will also change in comments and may change other ones that aren't that actual thing. So what I tend to do, Shift F2 is your friend for doing a rename. This is another bonus tip. Pscan for something, and that will only replace occurrences of that use of that parameter or that local variable. So yeah, I use those methods quite a lot. And as I said before, the refactor something into lines of code, I'll often select that, Control F2 and go extract method, gives you a place to do your new method. So we'll call this some more code method. And what it's done is two things. It's put in the call to that new method automatically in the method where you did the refactor. And if I navigate to that method, it's got those lines of codes that I selected. So yeah, refactor menu, Control F2, absolutely brilliant. Of course, I use Control F2 and Shift F2. I don't go up to the edit refactor option because I'm all about speed.
Awesome. And we did put a speed related dad joke into the chat. So if anybody wants to go check that out, it's there. So another quick one here. So problem with consolidated multi-method per MDI feature is that it doesn't play well with save windows on exit. If you exit and re-enter the IDE, it does not remember the method history you've traversed. Will this be supported or fixed? And it's the only reason our poster can't use the convenient feature. And again, BeeJay, acknowledging you're not on the Jade plant team, so this is probably a takeaway for that team to consider. But do you have any response?
I would absolutely, because quite often when you've done that Shift F11, it's often for a feature or an area of the product that you're quite often going to want to look around. And yeah, it would be really great, even if it can't be persisted, if there is a way to take that method list and say, make me a method view, schema view of those methods, that would be helpful. But yeah, absolutely, if that could be added to the list of what it remembers and it reinstates it with that list of methods that you navigated through, yeah, that would be a brilliant extension. So if you put that into the Jedi, I'll absolutely be upvoting that one straight away.
Awesome. And one more in here, BeeJay, that we haven't covered. You might be able to see it yourself. Be a little bit hard for me to read, but the one about regex support.
Regex support for class searches. Yeah. No, I know that regex support was one of the things that they covered earlier on, or are going to cover as something that they're adding into 2020. I don't know if that's been added for doing class searches, but yeah, that would be great if you could wildcard those searches. Yeah. Again, if you put that into Jedi, I'd absolutely be upvoting that as well.
John Richards, you want to comment on that?
I'll jump in there. Yeah, we've only just completed the regex feature. We haven't determined yet exactly how we're going to use that in the IDE. So that's something that we're investigating at the moment.
Great. And if people have feedback or ideas or suggestions there's a regex Jedi, right? Is that where you'd want them to put that?
Yeah, or I suspect they're probably best to create a new Jedi of how they would like to see it used rather than add that to the regex Jedi.
Awesome, great. And a couple people have posted some really good tips in the chat. I'm not going to try to read them all out, but please do go take a look. And then BeeJay's got his slide up here just as a reminder to share tips and tricks on Slack and Facebook as well. Awesome.
Okay.
I think
I'll
we've
stop
covered it. Thanks, BeeJay.
Not a problem. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the feedback.
From John, the source control improvements for 2020 are limited to furthering the existing patch approach. What's the medium or long-term strategy with regards to source control? Okay, I'll just remind us that we only have a few minutes. This is a topic that can take a lot of discussion, but John Richards, I think that's one for you to handle.
Yep, I think we can answer that by saying in 2020 we are focusing on existing patch control. The long term, we are about to formalize and publish a strategy. The strategy is based on not only the Git client, but also extensions to patch control.
Okay, excellent. And there's a question here, roadmap related as well. Is it likely that .NET 5 support will be added?
I think it's a little early to make an answer to that question at this stage.
Any other questions from the audience for John Richards, for BeeJay, for Tim, for our leadership team, for John Ascroft? Just a couple minutes left. There's one question, I don't know, Ty posted it here. And I'm not sure, since you're muted, I'll read it out in case someone else wants to comment on it, but I'm not totally clear on what it relates to. But it says, did you really mean that you could upgrade straight from 2016 to 2020 without going through 2018? So perhaps John Richards, if you could just kind of comment on that upgrade path. I think we
Yep, I think what they were alluding to there was that there are no database changes as there were, say, for a 7.1, that sort of thing. So you do have to go to 2018, but you can do it all quite quickly as one outage.
So that would help people planning on moving from 2016 to 2020. Sort of who that's targeted at. Any plan to create a framework for the web GUI? Question mark, React, question mark. John Richards?
Yep, certainly. To say there's a plan would not be true. It is something that we are actively investigating.
Now, before I say goodbye, I would like to hand over to John Ascroft for the wrap-up message. John?
Thanks, Arena, and thanks very much to everyone that stayed with us. I see one attendee has been up till 1:30 in the morning, so congratulations, and I hope you sleep well after this, and don't lie awake trying to replay all the 14 tips in your head. I've enjoyed the session. I hope you have. One thing I really want to encourage you to do is to fill in the NPS survey. Now, we always say that, and largely in the past, we've wanted to have the NPS survey filled in so that we can understand how well we're going and things you'd like us to change. I think this time it's particularly important because we've changed the format. We've tried to take on the feedback in the past, but in this case, I think it would be really interesting to get any comments you've got about how it worked for you. And the other thing that occurs to me is that notwithstanding the amount of preparation that we put into presenting this, it would be possible to run these more frequently than the traditional annual physical get-together. So perhaps when you're answering that NPS survey, any thoughts about whether you'd like to see more of these, whether annual is about right? Just, I think, any general comment about how we can be better here for you would be very useful for us. We want to engage with you. We want you to have the opportunity to see what the plant's doing. We want to learn what you want out of the product. And the more channels we can open for that, the better. On the other hand, we don't want to feel like we're over communicating and becoming very needy. So you need to tell us what works for you. And the NPS survey is a good opportunity to do that. We really will look at every answer and we really want to know what you think. I'd like to particularly thank all the members of the Jade team that have put together quite a lot of time rehearsing for this, have relocated their desks down to the banks of the river so that you get a nice background when they're talking, and have generally done their best to make this a success for you. I really hope it's worked. And we've enjoyed putting it together and we've enjoyed presenting it. Thank you very much for coming along. That's it from me. Thank you, Arena.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
everyone.
That's lovely words to finish on. Yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed today, and I hope we'll hear from you and keep the conversation going on our Jedi portal, on the Slack and Facebook communities. And we'd like to say our final goodbye now. Thanks everyone for being here with us today, and we wish you all the best. Till next time, bye.
Bye.